No, our political leaders have thus far never been able to agree to stick to a common set of principles and policies that deliver on a consistent basis for citizens, irrespective of ethnic group or political persuasion. And our big civil society groups like the NBA have not been able to hold politicians accountable. And I'm not going to flatter you, because segments of our legal system have also become beholden to those same politicians. But it is never too late to do the right thing. Instead of fighting over who gets what share of an ever smaller cake, it's about time this country had a meeting of all parties to agree a social contract that can help us focus on baking a larger cake. I will devote my remaining remarks to looking at potential elements of such a social contract. In line with my comparative advantage as an economist, I will focus on economic policies, though I'll offer a few thoughts on related areas as well. Note that I'm not trying to be exhaustive on what constitutes a social contract, just to give you some examples. Let me say here that trust will be a prerequisite for any social contract for rebuilding Nigeria, meeting our economic development challenges, and building a brighter future for the rising generations of young people. All political parties, all ethnic groups will have to honor this contract, no matter who is in government. The importance of trust in our country, given its size and diversity, has been clear since day one. Even before independence, in his first speech as Prime Minister in 1957, Sir Abubakar Tafawa Balewa said, and I quote, "The peoples of Nigeria must be united to enable this country to play a full part in shaping the destiny of mankind. It is the duty of all of us to work for unity and encourage members of all our communities to live together in peace and harmony. The way to do this is to create understanding, mutual respect, and trust." This is Sir Abubakar Tafawa Balewa in 1957. Trust comes not from words, but from deeds. That is from accomplishing things together, building together. A social contract could become a basis for the virtuous circles of reform, growth, peace, security, and trust that have too long eluded us. Turning now to potential ingredients of that social contract. The first element should be a shared understanding that we must prioritize the security of lives, property, and national assets. We cannot have economic or social development without security. And we certainly cannot have security without development. We all know that. Security has been weaponized in our country for political purposes by political actors, leading partly to the difficult situation we have now. We have politicians who believe that the best way to make their opponents look bad is to instigate insecurity, making it look like they can't govern, regardless of whether this leads to loss of life and property of innocent Nigerians. This has to stop. A second aspect of security relates to security of national assets. Nigerians have seen for years how organized crude oil theft on a massive scale seriously undermines the economic and financial health of the country. All Nigerians must agree that stealing of our national assets of any type is intolerable and must be stopped. How can we be struggling to see how to strengthen our foreign exchange reserves with the governor of the central bank working so hard on this, when so much is being lost through oil theft? There is so much technology available now to track such theft, and there must be no more excuses for inaction. Theft of electricity cables is another rampant and very dangerous form of pilfering of national assets. I can share two personal experiences. 2 weeks ago, the cables near our house in the village, in Omoda Isingu, were caught depriving our house and all the other houses in the village of electricity. They were caught and stolen. Yesterday, my husband called me from Abuja that there had been a major explosion near his clinic in Gwarimpa. And what was it? Some people cut the cables linked to the transformer, and the transformer exploded. They barely escaped with their lives. This kind of taking and stealing of national assets is unbelievably dangerous for those doing it, and it must be a mark of desperation and failure to see the bigger picture that leads people to do this. I'm pleading with all Nigerians that this has to stop. It's even endangering your own life to engage in this type of act. The second element of the social contract involves the basic organs of the economy. They should be left to work so as to produce the best economic and social results for the country, as I described in the case of Peru. First, we must continue to support the central bank and its work and support its independence. No one should try to tamper with the central bank, asking for manipulation of interest rates or the exchange rate. Do not use the central bank as a fiscal agent, asking for printing of naira beyond agreed ways and means limits, as this can fuel inflation. Fundamental fiscal and financial rules should be respected once they're on the books. Respect the use of the oil price-based fiscal rule that allows the accumulation of reserves and savings in good times to be used to cushion bad times. Respect the agreed budget deficit. Keep it as close to 3% of GDP as possible. Limit non-transparent extra budgetary spending, spent through the budget. Stick to transparency of FAC allocations and state and federal budgets so that citizens have a clear view of how their money is being spent. Do not exceed sensible limits for public debt as a percent of GDP. For an economy at Nigeria's stage of development and given its vulnerability, debt to GDP ratios should remain well below 40%. Debt service to revenue, we should strive not to exceed 33% so as not to crowd out operational and capital expenditures. Budget on the basis of a medium-term expenditure framework so as to provide a sound, forward-looking platform for economic and budget management. Create an investment-friendly business environment, cutting down on bureaucracy, licensing and policy uncertainty to encourage the domestic and foreign private sector to invest and remain in Nigeria. Respect of the above will ensure a sound macroeconomic framework with core economic management working on an objective basis to become a foundation for investment, growth, and employment. The third element of the social contract is provision of basic infrastructure services and a social safety net to catch segments of society that are super vulnerable. What is required is ongoing investment in and maintenance of the country's basic infrastructure assets for electricity, water, roads, and telecommunications. Nigerians don't expect much from government. We are used to sometimes being our own local government. But trust between those governing and those governed would be enormously increased if we had a better maintenance culture of the few infrastructural assets we have, and full transparency and information about when and how many hours a day, for example, we would not have light or we would have light, and information on why this is happening. Crafting and maintenance of social safety net programs for the most vulnerable, children and pregnant and nursing mothers. Working with states and local communities to ensure the truly vulnerable are reached. Conditional cash transfer programs can be some of the best means to do this, especially if coupled with biometrics. Community work programs for rural youth and entrepreneurship programs for young women and men, given the abundance of entrepreneurial talent in Nigeria. Part of a social contract must be continuous attention to youth unemployment and underemployment. Let me end my suggestions with a fourth element of the social contract, true independence of the judiciary and the Electoral Commission. All parties must agree that these institutions should not be tampered with, win or lose. As I said earlier, civil society, and in particular the Nigerian Bar Association, have a major responsibility to monitor observance of the social contract, especially the element of the Judiciary and Electoral Commission. The MBA should also be active in seeing which elements of the social contract can be institutionalized by codifying it into law or strengthening already existing laws, rules, and regulations. The MBA can even look at whether any part should be incorporated into our constitution to make them less easy to tamper with. The legal profession, led by the MBA, should be at the forefront of guaranteeing the social contract. This would be in keeping with what you have been quoting here, and I have it in my speech, Sapara Williams' maxim, that, quote, a lawyer lives for the direction of his people and her people and the advancement of the cause of the country. Now, I don't mean to oversell this idea of a social contract for Nigeria. I'm not saying it's a panacea that will suddenly cure all ills. But I'm convinced it will enable us to build a strong and stable foundation for Nigeria upon which it can thrive. A Nigeria of the future with steady and consistent growth and social development that will take us back to middle-income status and beyond. Of course, we will also need to take other actions to improve our education and health system, nurture our investments in physical and human capital. We will need to connect to the new and fast-changing world of technology. But believe me, I'm actually not worried about Nigeria's ability